As Europe struggles to avert a second banking crisis, this one linked to sovereign debt, Britain is the latest country to embrace truly harsh budgetary measures, with government departments asked to prepare for massive spending cuts, 25% up to a possible 40% in some cases. Hundreds of thousands of civil servants face the axe over the next few years. In that context, it's not surprising that the Queen would also be expected to take a substantial financial haircut. The royal household had asked Westminster to approve a rise in its official annual income. The Prime Minister has refused the request. After the very public scandal surrounding MPs' expenses, many in the UK are now demanding more information about how the palace spends its money. Europe correspondent Emma Elbrici.
She's been at the heart of British life for close to 6 decades. And as head of state, this year, like every other, the Queen took her place in the House of Lords to set out the government's agenda.
My government's legislative programme will be based upon the principles of freedom, fairness and responsibility. The first priority is to reduce the deficit and restore economic growth. Action will be taken to accelerate the reduction of the structural budget deficit.
For some Britons, it was jarring to hear those words coming from a woman wearing 3,000 diamonds and jewels worth more than $250 million. Even more so when she later asked the British taxpayers to give her a pay rise.
No ifs, no buts. We want royal cuts.
Outside Buckingham Palace this week, a group of protesters angry about cuts to the public service called for the Queen to cut back too. Graham Smith was one of the organisers. He's the campaign manager for Republic, a group lobbying for an elected head of state.
The point is that this is the most expensive monarchy in Europe. It's the most expensive head of state in Europe, to the tune of tens of millions of pounds.
The Queen now costs 62 pence per person in the UK. It's significantly less than it was the year before.
Well, it doesn't. I mean, this is it's palace press office spin. You know, they're leaving out security, a figure which we're not really allowed to see. But I mean, estimates put that from anything from 50 million to 100 million, so that's more than doubling it right there. You've got revenue lost from taxes that aren't paid because the Queen pays voluntary taxes. Doesn't tell us how much that is, so anyone's guess how much we're losing there.
Monarchists say the Queen's worth is obvious as the crowds gather every day around the gates of Buckingham Palace.
You look around Buckingham Palace, hordes of people going there to watch changing of the guard, hordes of people waiting in the hope of seeing a member of the royal family driving in and out. So yes, do they get value for money? I believe they do.
It may be that the Queen and Prince Philip are value for money, but it's the scores of courtiers and hangers-on and various flunkies that they have that at a time of hardship and economic difficulty, we're not certain that we can really afford to keep them in the style to which they've become accustomed.
In the last financial year, the monarchy cost the British taxpayer $69 million. That money was spent on official functions, salaries for the Queen's 1,200 staff, travel and property maintenance. Now, the palace does publish an annual report, but critics say it's scant on detail, particularly about what the people who work here do and how exactly they're paid. They say it's particularly vague on one important point: who exactly gets to live here and in the other palaces rent-free.
And there's someone who lives rent-free with 2 bedrooms, 1 reception room, and their sole job is to look after the Royal Library.
Robert Vercake is the legal affairs editor and royal correspondent for The Independent. This bundle of papers reveals some of what the royals spend their money on. It's the result of The Independent's Freedom of Information requests. The palace has fought all the way to the High Court against the newspaper's attempts to find out the Queen's expenses.
The shocking part is how little we know about who benefits from the royal patronage.
The documents show that the palace was either paying salaries and or providing rent-free accommodation to the minor royals, Princess Alexandra, the Queen's cousin, as well as her other cousins, the Duke and Duchess of Kent and the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester, even though they perform little to no public functions and are virtually unknown, even in their own country.
Yeah, names and shames.
Robert Verkake's investigation also found that some household staff at the palaces not only get free accommodation, but entire residences within the palaces. In one case, a housekeeper was given an apartment rent-free with 5 living rooms and 5 bedrooms. Heather Brooke thinks some of the royal expenses are so extravagant they make the recently exposed MP's expenses seem trivial. She should know it was her investigation of MP's expenses that created a scandal last year which led to several resignations and prosecutions.
When I started out on MP's expenses, they were considered it was considered not the done thing to be asking questions about our right honourable members, and there was a sense of deference that they were beyond questioning and that they were just to be trusted on the face of it. And I don't think it's good to ever trust people in power with and not expect them to have a responsibility to answer questions and to be challenged.
She was hoping to scrutinise royal expenses, but she's been stunned to find out that since the Independence Court case, freedom of information laws have been changed to exempt not only the royal family, but any correspondence between the government and the palace.
I think it's outrageous. I mean, in a democracy, members of the state should be accountable to the citizens. And if the royal family want to say that it's about their private life, that's fine, but don't take any public subsidy then. There is a cost when you take public money, and that is that you have to be transparent to the public about how you're spending it.
Chancellor George Osborne announced in last month's budget that the Queen would not receive the pay rise she was after in the so-called civil list.
Because of inflation, the annual payment is today worth only a quarter of what it was 20 years ago. I can announce that with the full agreement of the Queen, the civil list will remain frozen at £7.9 million for the coming year.
The government has announced that it'll revise the way the Queen is paid, and for the first time in 250 years, the palace will be forced to open its books to the government's auditors.
We welcome the announcement from the government that they're going to bring the audit office in to look at the books, and apparently they're going to roll everything into one big grant and make it properly accountable to Parliament as well. Now that's good news, but why is it only going to happen in a couple of years, and are they going to be cutting the total amount being spent on them? The fact that it's going to be waiting another couple of years before they do all this begs the question, are they simply trying to, giving themselves time to hide some of the details that are going to be embarrassing before the audit office gets their hands on the books?
They provide continuity and stability. At the end of the day, when you have something like a hung parliament, it is the Queen who makes not the final decision, but she will call upon the leader of a party to try and form a government.
So it will be another 2 years before the palace books are subjected to a government audit. In a statement to the ABC, a spokesperson for the Queen said exempting the royals from freedom of information requests was important to recognise the unique constitutional position of the monarchy, which relies on well-established conventions of confidentiality.
Emma Alberici reporting from London.